The following website gathers together various articles on ancient Egypt astronomical lore. Our primary focus is on the astral traditions included in the pyramid texts, the oldest body of religious text to survive from antiquity. As is evident from the extensive literature on the subject, the identification of the various celestial bodies described in the pyramid texts is subject to much controversy. Authorities rarely agree on the identifications in question, and where agreement is found, there are grave problems with virtually every solution proposed. There are several reasons for this situation, not the least of which is the relative obscurity of the language employed in the texts themselves. Equally important is the fact that astronomy did not yet exist as a science at the time the pyramid texts were composed, and thus systematic observations and scientifically rigorous descriptions of the various celestial bodies and constellations are not to be found during this early period in Egypt. In order to achieve proper understanding of the Egyptian traditions, it is instructive to compare them with the astral traditions from Mesopotamia and elsewhere. Cross-cultural comparisons of this sort readily reveal common patterns and thus point towards more reliable identifications and insights into the nature of the Egyptian cosmos. It is our opinion that the patterns in question are most logically explained as resulting from common astronomical observations. The Eye of Horus. Originally an explanation of the daily disappearance and reappearance of the sun, Horus's eye became a symbol of permanent soundness and was evidently adopted in rituals to signify the eternal viability of the offering. The legend of the flight of the eye and its return is obviously similar in many respects to the legends of the destroying eye of Ra, of the angry eye, which became the serpent, the diadem of the sun god crown, of Anurus, who fetched the divine lioness from the eastern desert, and of Hathor of Byblos. All these are intricately interwoven,
So much so, indeed,
that it is often very difficult to decide to which of them is a particular feature or motif primitively belongs. Of all the divine entities in the Egyptian pantheon, the Eye of Horus remains the most enigmatic and misunderstood. This is only to be expected, perhaps, given the fact that the original celestial identification of Horus himself continues to elude Egyptologists. You ain't kidding. In order to understand the multifaceted and often peculiar symbolism attached to the Eye of Horus, it is essential at the outset to come to grips with the Egyptian traditions telling of its incendiary rampage that reportedly brought the world to the very brink of extinction. This archaic mythological theme is most familiar, perhaps, from a text known as The Destruction of Mankind. Now there's a title. One of the oldest mythological narratives to survive from ancient Egypt. There, Hathor is dispatched by Ra to punish mankind. It's a familiar theme. Then mankind plotted something in the very presence of Ra. Then they, Ra's advisors, said, in the presence of his majesty, "May thy eye be sent, that it may catch for thee them who scheme with evil things." That would make a good Christmas card. Go down as Hathor. So then this goddess came and slew mankind in the desert. The destructive campaign of the raging eye was commonly mythologized as a bloodbath waged by the warrior goddess Hathor and her alter ego Sekhmet. Indeed, in the same text we read, Hathor will wade in the blood of mankind as Sekhmet. The testimony of this text, as of the earlier pyramid and coffin texts as well, is that the eye's rampage occurred at the dawn of time, i.e. in Illo Tempore, when the ancient celestial gods still ruled the earth. Although this particular text dates to the New Kingdom, the myth of the Raging Eye Goddess is attested in the Pyramid of Venus, circa 2350 BCE, and alluded to repeatedly throughout the 3,000 years of Egyptian history. In Venus's pyramid, we read that the flame from Horus's eye produced an all-encompassing storm.
I, Horus, will put flame in my eye, and it will encompass you and set storm among the doers of evil deeds, and its fiery outbursts among those primeval ones. I will smite away the arms of Shu which support the sky.
The coffin texts are likewise replete with allusions to the primeval catastrophe wrought by the Eye of Horus. Spell 316 emphasizes the terrifying power of the raging goddess. I am the fiery Eye of Horus, which went forth, terrible, lady of slaughter, greatly awesome, who came into being in the flame of the sunshine, whom Ra granted appearings in glory. What Ra said about her: mighty is the fear of you, great is the awe of you, mighty is your striking power. All men have been in the sleep of death because of you and through your power. I am indeed she who shoots. Here as elsewhere, in the eye is likened to a heaven-spanning flame. The eye is elsewhere associated with fire falling from the sky, as in spell 946, wherein it is made to announce, I am the fire in the sky and earth, and all my foes are under my flame. Other hymns report that fire and devastation accompany the eye's rampage. The fire will go up, the flame will go up. The fiery one will be against them as the Eye of Ra. Elsewhere it is said of the warring eye goddess, its flame is to the sky. At one time or another, every major Egyptian goddess is identified with the Eye of Horus: Hathor, Isis, Webset, Wadjet, Mut or Mut. The goddess Sekhmet offers an instructive case in point. In the Bremner Rind Papyrus, it is Sekhmet who protects the king and wards off his enemies as the raging eye. Thou art condemned to this fire of the Eye of Ra. It sends forth its fiery blast against thee, in this its name of Wadjet. It consumes thee, in this its name of devouring flame. It has power over thee, it has power over thee, in this its name of Sekhmet. It is fiery against thee, and this its name of glorious serpent. The image of Sekhmet as a raging goddess is abundantly attested among the sacred texts discovered at Philae. Here, as elsewhere, Sekhmet is identified as the Eye of Horus. Sekhmet, the strong one, is in her form as the Eye of Horus, the living eye, while spreading fire with the flame when she goes round, while scorching the rebels with the heat of her mouth. She is the primeval snake. In the text from Edfu, Sekhmet is once again compared to a flame-throwing serpent and celebrated for her protective powers. Witness the following passage. O Sekhmet, Eye of Ra, great of flame, lady of protection who envelopes her creator. O Sekhmet, who fills the ways with blood, who slaughters to the limits of all she sees, come towards the living image, the living hawk, protect him and preserve him from all evil. According to scattered statements preserved in the pyramid and coffin texts, the raging eye goddess was eventually pacified or otherwise dissuaded from her terrifying rampage, thereby saving the world from total annihilation. The following account from the coffin text alludes to this motif. The storm of her who is mighty of dread, witness of the land, is quelled. This peculiar pacifying of the raging eye is typically attributed to the heroic interventions of either Shu or Anubis. The two gods were commonly identified. Thus, Shu was described as follows in spell 325 from the coffin text. He subdued the eye when it was angry and fiery, and he might lead the great ones and have power over the gods. The same idea is alluded to in spell 75, wherein Shu is made to announce, "I have extinguished the fire, I have calmed the soul of her who burns, I have quietened her who is in the midst of her rage, even she, the fiery one who served the tresses of the gods." The phrase translated by Faulkner here as "extinguish the fire" seems to have served as a terminus technicus for the calming of the raging eye. Numerous texts from the Ptolemaic period, likewise alluded to in the calming of the raging eye of Shu and Horus, or alternately by Thoth. These traditions were collected and analyzed by Hermann Juncker, or Human Juncker, and have come to be known by the generic name of the Wandering Goddess theme. Although nearly 2,000 years later than the pyramid and coffin texts, such texts are still well worthy of serious study, as they frequently manage to preserve archaic motifs of profound import, even though they betray rather clumsy attempts to historicize and localize the myth of the raging eye goddess, originally celestial in nature. Localize the myth of the raging eye goddess, originally celestial in nature. The basic plot of the Wandering Goddess theme finds the eye goddess, variously identified as Hathor, Tefnet, Wadjet, Mut, etc., going into exile and abandoning Egypt for some distant land, typically Nubia or Libya, whereupon she goes on a destructive rampage in the form of a raging eye or lion. It is only through the magical interventions of Shu, Horus, or Thoth that the warrior goddess is pacified and induced to return to Egypt. Much as the departure of the eye goddess throws the world into confusion and chaos, so too does her return restore the order to the world. With her pacification, the order of the cosmos is also restored. The myth of the wandering goddess as raging eye formed a central theme in various New Year's rituals celebrated throughout Egypt during the Ptolemaic period. The rite in question typically featured prodigious bouts of drinking, the lighting of torches, loud music, and ecstatic dancing in an apparent attempt to pacify the raging goddess. Evidently, the rite culminated in the marriage of the eye goddess with her rescuer, Shu, Horus, or Horus himself. John Darnell summarized the HORUS Gamos as follows: "The return of the goddess coincided with the coming of the god, and their union at the entrance of the temple, the place of nocturnal celebration and inebriation." A measure of just how important the rite was deemed to be can be seen from the fact Egyptian monuments from this period depict the pharaoh emulating or reacting the role of Shu and Horus by performing a series of gyrating dances and other magical acts, such as the vigorous rattling of sistrums, in an attempt to pacify the raging goddess. Such mimetic performances were performed in order to calm the eye's raging. According to Darnell, the boisterous music and dancing was believed to soothe the goddess and ward off noxious elements, their noisy revelry of the celebrants appeasing the ever more calm goddess, cacophony driving away baleful influences. Although the precise circumstances attending the pacification of the Eye of Horus are never spelled out as explicitly as we might wish, it seems clear that upon being soothed, the eye was returned or otherwise restored to the god Horus. Indeed, a wealth of evidence suggests that the eye goddess eventually came to adorn the Horus star as his royal headband or crown. An instructive text in this regard is spell 220-221 from the pyramid text, wherein the eye goddess is addressed by a series of epithets identifying her as the Red Crown. "He has come to you, O Nt Crown. He has come to you, O Fiery Serpent. He has come to you, O Great One. He has come to you, O Great of Magic. being pure for you and fearing you. He has come to you, O great of magic, for he is Horus, encircled with the protection of his eye. O great of magic, Ho crown, great of magic, Ho, fiery serpent, grant that the dread of me be like the dread of you. Grant that the fear of me be like the fear of you. If Aket the Great was born you, Aket the serpent has adorned you. If Aket the serpent has borne you, Aket the Great has adorned you, because you are Horus, encircled with the protection of his eye. A statement here, in no uncertain terms, is the encircling sin Horus by the fire-spewing Uraeus goddess, addressed as Aket the serpent, among other archaic epithets, which provides a star god with his eye, and nearby equips him with magical source of protection. A classic text in this regard is the so-called coronation hymn of Haremheb, wherein we read that the Uraeus serpent, explicitly addressed as Great of Magic, was indispensable for the crowning of the Egyptian pharaoh. Her arms in welcoming attitude as she embraced his beauty and established herself on his forehead, and the divine in need, where in exultation at his glorious rising. A much later passage from the Ptolemaic Hemispheros at Elkab, addressing the wandering goddess, seems to attest to the same general idea. Welcome, says Ra, welcome. Come back upon the head of him whom you have protected, the head from which you went forth. According to Egyptian tradition, return of the raging eye to its rightful place atop the brow of the Horus star endows the latter with power, glory, and his magical crown. Indeed, it is no exaggeration to say that the Eye of Goddess invests the Horus star as the king of the gods. Through his act of encirclement or conjunction, Susan Johnson has summarized the primeval event in questions as follows. The god of creation appraised the eye, which had become a cobra, by placing it on his forehead as the Uraeus, Leret, the risen one, who guards the crown. Pacification of the cobra thus marked the establishment of monarchy, and the Uraeus became the protective symbol of legitimate kingship and unity. Johnson's conclusion is right on the money and bears repeating. It is the pacification and reunion of the Uraeus serpent with the Horus star which makes the establishment of kingship and thereby restores order to the world after the catastrophic events attending its departure. Katya Goabs has recently offered a similar assessment. The return of the eye or eyes corresponds with the investiture of the new Horus king and, on a cosmic level, to the daily rising of the sun. Even from this brief survey, it is evident that the Eye of Horus plays a central role in ancient Egyptian conceptions regarding kingship and divinity. How then are we to explain the peculiar mythology attached to the raging eye goddess? James Allen, together with the vast majority of Egyptologists, would identify the Eye of Horus with the sun. Allen summarized the rich symbolism attached to the eye as follows. The Uraeus goddess is essentially the destructive power of the sun. She is a goddess because the sun is viewed in this case as the eye of the sun god, Horus or Ra, Re, whichever you prefer, which is feminine. She is normally represented as a cobra, Wajet, also feminine. Because of the notion of a power that can strike and kill, the hieroglyphic representation of this is in 6, the sun disk with a cobra. The same power is viewed as inherent in a king's headgear, which is why it also has a Uraeus. The primary thing to keep in mind, however, is the notion of the eye. In myth, she represents both the sun as an eye and its destructive power. Her common epithet, Great of Magic, derives from the idea of the eye as conveyor of intent. Some notion as the evil eye, which also existed in ancient Egypt. Through syncretism, she is associated with other major goddesses, such as Isis and Hathor. Yet, if the Eye of Horus is to be identified with the sun, how are we to understand its departure from Horus? For if Horus is to be identified with the sun, as Allen assures us, one is left with the seemingly paradoxical situation wherein the eye-sun departs from itself after threatening the world with destruction, returns to encircle or crown itself. It must also be asked why the Egyptian skywatchers would conceptualize one and the same celestial body as simultaneously both male, Horus, and female, Hathor, as the eye. Insofar as the Horus star represented the celestial prototype of the masculine warrior, while the eye represented the celestial prototype as the mother goddess. This hypothesis strains credulity. Mistress is very limited. The explicit catastrophic imagery attending the raging of the fire-spewing eye is equally difficult to explain by Allen's hypothesis. Under what circumstances does the sun threaten to destroy the world? In what sense is the sun displaced from heaven while presenting a terrifying serpentine form? What is there about the sun's familiar appearance that would lead it to be conceptualized as the supreme goddess, the serpentine goddess, protecting the Horus star by circling it as a luminous crown or headband? Far from being a reference to one and the same celestial body, Horus's relationship with the eye can only be understood as reflecting an interaction or conjunction between two entirely different stars. On this matter, the preponderance of evidence is unequivocal. The Eye of Horus is to be identified with the mother goddess herself, and, as such, it represents a wholly different star from that associated with the masculine Horus, Mars. In ancient Egypt, as around the globe, only one star fits the bill as the celestial prototype for the mother goddess, namely Venus. In this conclusion, we find ourselves in complete agreement with Rolf Krauss, who in a number of publications investigating Egyptian astro-religion argued the Eye of Horus is to be identified with the planet Venus. Granted the possibility that the planet Venus is the subject of the Egyptian traditions regarding the Eye of Horus, how are we to understand the cataclysmic imagery attending its destructive rampage? Whence derives the eye's pronounced capacity for raining fire and destruction on mankind? Why would the planet Venus be conceptualized as a raging eye at one moment and as pacified or calmed on another? On these all-important questions, Krauss had nothing substantive to offer, noting simply, it remains unclear how the observer understood raging and peacefulness. As we intend to document, the Egyptian texts provide a wealth of testimony on each of these questions. This testimony, in turn, can then be compared with literary traditions from ancient Mesopotamia and elsewhere that describe the planet Venus in similar terms, i.e., as an agent of terrifying world-engulfing disaster, one prone to assuming a fire-spewing serpentine form. It was in the latter form, according to the exaltation of Inanna, that the warmongering planet goddess rained fire from heaven. When you roar at the earth like thunder, no vegetation can stand up to you. A flood descending from its mountain, O foremost one, you are the Inanna of heaven and earth, raining the fanned fire down upon the nation when mankind comes before you in fear and trembling at your tempestuous radiance. Analogous imagery is evident in early literary accounts of the Semitic goddess Ishtar, who, like the Sumerian Inanna, is explicitly identified with the planet Venus. Inanna, who pours down rain over all the lands, over all the people, loud thundering storm. Herodul, who makes the heavens tremble, who makes the earth quake, who can soothe your heart. You, who pour down firebrands over the earthly orb, who flash like lightning over the highland, whose cry reaches heaven and earth, whose roar is all destructive. Your angry heart is a terrifying flood. Even from this brief summary, the striking parallels between the mythology attached to Inanna Venus and that attached to the Eye of Horus are readily apparent. Yet in the dozens of monographs devoted to the ancient eye goddess, not to mention the hundreds of articles that have addressed the mythological theme and symbolism of the raging Eye of Horus, I am unaware of any scholar who has even commented on the parallels between the Eye and Inanna Venus, much less offered a systematic cross-cultural analysis of the traditions. Suffice to say that knowledge of comparative mythology is not widespread in modern Egyptological circles. As a result, modern Egyptology remains mired in the same solar interpretations that ruled at the turn of the 20th century, seemingly oblivious to the fact that ancient Sumerian descriptions of Inanna Venus share a virtual one-to-one correspondence with Egyptian descriptions of the Eye of Horus. To summarize our findings in this chapter, a wealth of evidence confirms that the Eye of Horus is to be identified with the planet Venus. This finding, in turn, has profound ramifications for the proper understanding of ancient Egyptian religion insofar as the history of the Eye Goddess is catastrophic from start to finish, marked by apocalyptic cosmic disaster, terrifying storms spanning the sky, and the disturbance or displacement of the other star gods. After an intermediate period of time, the raging eye was eventually calmed or pacified, and as a result, the apocalyptic disaster was averted and cosmic order restored. According to the account preserved in spells 220 and 221, from the pyramid text, the eye eventually came to encircle the star god Horus as a serpentine goddess, Iket the serpent, thereby providing him with a heaven-spanning headband and crown. It is our view that the eye goddess's headbanding of the Horus star was direct reference to dramatic astronomical events in which Iket Venus appeared to conjoin the Horus star and encircle it with a comet-like band, hence the otherwise inexplicable situation wherein one word, SSD, denotes at once Iket's headband, as well as a flame-scattering star. The fact that the same word is elsewhere determined by the following glyph, the cobra with the circle, confirms its intimate relationship with the Uraeus serpent that came to form the circling crown of Horus. In light of the evidence adduced here, we are emboldened to consider the possibility that the Eye of Horus, Iket, serpent, and SSD headband are simply variant mythological interpretations of the same celestial form, a comet-like Venus. Given this working hypothesis, it stands to reason that it was the terrifying rampage of the Venus comet which provided the historical prototype for Egyptian traditions regarding the raging Eye of Horus and the SSD star. F. Cochran. The hell you say? Welcome to a new edition, a segment I call The Hell You Say. I found that Graham Hancock episode that I was talking about in the comments, where the host of the show brings up Hancock Velikovsky. I'll leave the link for the video in the comments. I'm just going to play a little part for you right here when Dr. Velikovsky gets brought up. Watch how Graham Hancock sidesteps him.
Go ahead. Make my day.